opened to the public 2 years later. Since that time, the cemetery has seen several additions to that original bond section, as they called it. This section that we are in right now, as I mentioned, is the Garden of Memory. It's actually the newest section, quote, of the cemetery, and it was started plotting in the late 1920s, and it opened for sales in around 1930. So again, new, but almost 100 years old now here. The cemetery is still active today. And over 26,000 people are buried or interred here at the cemetery. The entrance that you guys came in on over on Main and Cherry is actually the third entrance to the cemetery. The first one was on South 11th, but then it was moved to Cherry Street as, you know, South 11th became more of a main thoroughway for the city, and then they moved it to the current entrance in the 1930s too. So the big part of this tour here is the imposing structure you see right behind us, the Silverbrook Abbey. The Abbey was actually built in 1926. We have a newspaper article that talk about the city council approving the cemetery. That work started, it looked like, in the mid-1920s, and this article is from 1925. It's when they actually passed the resolution to build the structure behind us. They say that they're going to have Charles Latchaw Brothers do the construction on the Abbey, and that they were going to start selling spaces for it right away. There are actually 160 spaces in the Abbey, and 137 of them are occupied too. So we actually have some cool historic photos that Haley over here has on the tablet. She's going to show some photos throughout the tour. They're also available on the Niles History Center website. There's a link right on the homepage, so you can check them out after. And we'll keep that up for about a week or so anyone who wants to see stuff after the tour can check it out. But we have a couple historic photos of the Abbey that date to the early 1930s. I like the one because it shows like that area around here is not really filled or plotted out yet. It's very early on. So several people are interred here at the Abbey, and kind of one of the themes for the tour, I would say, in addition to this section, there are a lot of the 20th century industry leaders in Niles on this tour buried in this section or in the Abbey. A lot of former city leaders, including several mayors of Niles, are in this area too, and people who were really leaders in the community throughout the 20th century. So when you go in the Abbey, which we'll give a chance in just a moment, you'll notice that against the wall here, there are 4 different family areas. One is for Benign, there's one for the Canes, one for the Hara family, and one for the Smiths. We will highlight all of these people and a few others as well. So I think I'm going to start with the ones when you go in. You'll see them on the left side there, the Benigns. We have some pictures Haley has of the Benigns too. So Benign is a big name in Niles during this time as well. And in the mausoleum here, you have Fred Benign and his family. Fred was actually born in Niles in 1863. His father and mother were Evan and Evelyn Benign. And Evan Benign was actually a doctor. He had a practice in Niles for a long time. He was a surgeon in the Civil War as well. So he was born in the middle of the war in 1863. He went to Niles schools, and he went to the University of Michigan too, and he followed in his father's footsteps and became a doctor. And he actually had an eye clinic in Niles for over 40 years. He served thousands of patients who visited him from really all over the country. He became very well known. He actually went and trained over in Europe for a while after he went to the University of Michigan. He came back to Niles, joined his father's practice, eventually starting his own. He had a special treatment for cataracts. His solution reportedly decreased the opacity of the cataracts, making surgery unnecessary. This would have been in the early 1900s here. He found the solution worked in 60% of the cases. It was a very popular idea at the time. From what we can tell, we don't think his solution was widely accepted by the medical community at the time, but people came to Niles to see Dr. Benign. Buses actually ran from Chicago on special routes to come here to see him. And I imagine, if you don't feel like you have any other solution, you hear about this doctor here, a short bus ride away, who has this, quote, miracle cure, you're going to go. Yep. So It said he never made appointments. Patients were seen in order of arrival, and they would all crowd in his office. We actually have a postcard as one of the pictures that show a bunch of people in Benign's office. He would charge small fees for his practice, but he was also known to not charge people if they couldn't afford it as well. In addition to being a doctor for a long time, he was also very into sports. He was on the Michigan State Athletic Board of Control and the Michigan Boxing Commission. He was friends with Jack Dempsey. There's actually a picture of them together we have in our collection. He was Niles' mayor, and he was actually called the city's most distinguished citizen when he died in 1941. So very well known in the community. He was married to Viva. Her maiden name was Thomas. They married in 1886. They had one daughter. Her name was Natalie. Natalie was born in 1890. One of the photos Haley has shows this adorable photo from the collection of Natalie and Viva when Natalie was little. It's very cute. Definitely check it out, too. They're all interred in the cemetery. She married a guy named Willard French. Natalie did. They lived in Detroit. He was part of an advertising agency there. And that's really where they ended up. But they are both in the in the mausoleum as well, too. So that's the Benign family. The other family that I'm going to highlight here are the Canes. So you have Thomas Kane, you'll see the name in there. He was born in Illinois in 1889, came to Niles in the early 1900s. He was a banker. He worked at the Newman and Snell Bank and at the State Bank of Niles. He was also vice president of the First National Bank of Niles as well. He was a World War I veteran. That's another trend on this tour, a lot of World War I veterans too. He was in a number of clubs in Niles, and he died in 1953. He was married to a woman named Grace. Her maiden name was Ricketts. She was also very active in the community in a lot of women's clubs, too. Their son was Thomas W. Kane. He was born in 1918. He went to the Niles schools, graduated from University of Michigan in 1939. He went to Notre Dame Law School and graduated in 43. He was Niles Justice of the Peace for about 10 years. He was the city's first municipal judge, and he served that for like 6 terms as well. So another person very active in the community there too. So you'll see that name in there too. There's also other people buried there, interred there, not in some of the family plots. People like the Hendersons, which in the 20th century in Niles, in the mid 20th century, I hear you would know Fred and Mary Henderson. They were both doctors in the Niles community. See, I see some people nodding their heads. They recognized him. And Fred's parents were also doctors in the community as well. So they have that 2 generations of doctors, too. His parents are in the cemetery, not in this section. They're in, I believe, the news section over there. So those are just a few of the names that you'll see in there. I think we'll take a quick break and let people look in the Abbey, and we'll meet back out here. So we'll take a few minutes if you want to take a look.